She went back for another scan. The doctor called us in, and again, it's one of those times you won't ever forget. And the doctor sat there and he looked at her and he said, it's not good. She said, well, what do you mean not good? He said, you'll be fortunate enough to see your oldest daughter graduate from high school. Well, starting out, my childhood was normal, just like anybody else's, and it was 1964 when that changed. When I look back on my 69 years of life, you look at, and I'm no different than anybody else. If you look at your own story, your own history, your own life, we have events that happen in our life that changes how we think about things. It changes our life circumstances and all that good stuff. And that definitely happened when in 1964, I was the second child of four. I had an older brother, Sam. He was 12 at the time, and I was 7 years old, would have been 8 that June. I had a little brother that's 15 months younger than I am. He would have been 5 or 6 at the time. And a little sister is 18 months old. And we were sitting in our living room one day, and we lived in a little small room house, a 4 small room house, and in Leach, Tennessee. I always say it's the big metropolis, but it's just a small little spot in the road with 2 stores, and it was home. It was where I grew up. But we were sitting there with my aunt, my dad's sister, and the phone rang. And it's a day that I'll never forget, because on the other end of the phone was my mother. And my mother was with my dad in Memphis, Tennessee. He was having open heart surgery. He was 34 years old. And mother had called to say dad had passed away. And excuse me, during these, when I talk about things, I'm a pretty emotional person. So I get emotional at times, and I just apologize for that right off the bat. But I can remember that day just like it was yesterday. Because 7 years old, what does this mean? And moving forward, it meant a lot of things. Because here my mother has never worked a day in her life outside the home. She's raising 4 kids, and now things are different. Our dad, 34 years old, is no longer with us. And I never got to know my dad. I just know little snippets of who he was. People have told me over the years he was a good man. But that's all I have. I don't have the memories that some people have of going out in the yard and playing pitch with your dad, or him teaching you things. I don't have that. But, and that changed how I thought about a lot of things. It changed. I'm a firm believer that who you are, it never changes. The deep down who you are never changes. The personality of who you are will always be with you. But life events and circumstances change how you react to things, and how you respond to those circumstances. And maybe at one time I was a little defiant, and because I didn't have a dad. My older brother, in a sense, took on that role because mother had to go find a job. She had to find employment to support 4 kids. We didn't have any money. I mean, it's one of those situations that I've seen a lot of people in. But again, that's one of those life circumstances that changes how you think about things later on. And it changed a little bit in 1967 because my mother started work at the Milan Arsenal. And when she did, she started riding with 2 or 3 different people because they were carpooling, so to speak. And she met this guy, 9 years younger than she was. And they eventually got married in 1967, 3.5 years after Dad died. And at first, me being at the time 10, 11 years old, that wasn't acceptable to me because that's not my dad. And my stepfather came close with maybe my younger brother because my younger brother had a desire and a passion for hunting. I didn't. I tried it, just didn't like it. It's just not me. I'm more of a I'm a baseball guy. I'm a football guy. I'm a sports fanatic. But I could care less about going setting out and traipsing through the woods shooting at squirrels, or sitting in a deer stand, or sitting in a duck stand waiting for a duck to come by. I just wasn't me. But Mark took to that. Him and Wayne got fairly close, and they still are to this very day. But I didn't. So I'm still kind of traveling on a path by myself in a way, or it seemed at the time. But, eventually I got married when I was 18, which was a mistake. That's too young, or in my case, it was. And that marriage didn't last. And eventually I married a different woman. And, I talk about life circumstances, and death has been a big part of that. Because when my dad died, me being 7, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have answers for that. My mother didn't. I don't remember my mother giving me answers for that. But I married this woman. We were married for 20 years. And again, it's another one of those circumstances that that'll stay with you forever. It'll be one of those, you'll always remember where you were on 9/11, or you remember where you were. Of course, y'all are too young to know this, but when Kennedy was shot, you remember where you were when all those events happened. And I remember where I was, and I quoted that earlier, where I was when Dad died. I remember that day just as vividly as I'm remembering what happened 5 minutes ago. But Pam and I had been married 20 years, and they found a lump on her breast. And they diagnosed it as calcifications. That's a term I hadn't forgot. But they thought, well, let's go do a biopsy and see if it's cancer or whatever. And they came back and they said, well, I think we can go in there and remove that tissue and not do a lumpectomy. I mean, not a mastectomy, and you'll be fine. And she went through some radiation. After 2 years, everything's progressing along fine. And she went back for another scan. The doctor called us in. And again, it's one of those times you won't ever forget. And the doctor sat there and he looked at her and he said, it's not good. She said, well, what do you mean not good? He said, you'll be fortunate enough to see your oldest daughter graduate from high school. And she was 16 at the time. Or no, she was younger than that at the time. She's 13. And sure enough, 3 years, he gave her 3 years. In 3 years, she died. Here I am, 49 years old, and about to turn 50. And now I'm left with 2 children that have lost their mother. 16, my oldest daughter's 16. My youngest daughter is 11. And I'm in the same position now than as my mother was years and years ago. And something that I've always talked about, and there's, sometimes I get to rambling, so excuse me, but now, and I'll get back to my point. But the pastor of the church I go to now made a statement one time, and it's so true, and it's been true in my life, and it's true in a lot of other people's lives, that we all have times in our life where we step away from God, but that return trip is one step. And that's been a lot of my life. I've never been in a position to where I've totally walked away from God, but sometimes maybe I've put him in the back seat. But so much of my faith has shaped all the circumstances that have happened in my life. At the time when I was 7 and my dad died, I don't know how much faith had to play in it because I was too young, I'll be honest. But when my wife was going through cancer, if it hadn't been for my faith, I would have never made it. Hadn't been for the church, I would have never made it through that situation. Because Pam and I used to sit around and pray that God would resolve the situation. And then when she died, my first thought was, God, we prayed, and you didn't keep your promise. And then I thought about it. The more I thought about it, I go, yes, he did. Because I know today she sits at his right hand. So he took her cancer away. And I've always said, and this is one of my favorite sayings, is that funerals are not for the deceased. Funerals are for the living. Because if your faith is in the right place, uh, death is a good thing. But and I learned that through. Uh, I said often, Pam was a hard woman. Sometimes she could be difficult, but she was the strongest person I'll ever know. Because when you're given a death sentence, uh, I've never faced that. She did, and to see her go through that, the strength that she had. But what was unique about it, she didn't worry about herself. She didn't want to leave her children. And of course, it didn't work out that way. But because of all that, life changed again. It's another one of those events that changed. And you've got to ask yourself when you're going through situations, is it going to make you better? Or are you going to succumb? Or are you going to give in to what's happened to you? You're either going to crawl under the bed or you're going to get up and move. And I've always been a mover. And I can say today that it was difficult raising two children. It'd have been better off if it'd been me, because girls want their mother. I couldn't provide things for them that their mother could, but I did the best I could and made some mistakes along the way. Made a lot of mistakes along the way in different areas. But I can also say that I have two great children. I have two wonderful children. Great, tremendous jobs. One's an occupational therapist, the other's a marketing director, and they're living great lives. So somebody did something right. I don't know if it was me, but together we did it together. And but through all those years, I've never. I go back to that comment where if you turn your back on God, all you got to do is turn back around. He's there. He pursues you wherever you go. He never leaves you. And I know that even through the times when he's been disappointed in me, and trust me, he's been disappointed in me before. But I've always known that he was there when I needed him. And that's shaped my life. That's who I am. And life right now, it could not be any better than what it is. I inherited 3 grandchildren. We got another one on the way. My wife and I here on the farm run a successful business. I'm doing things that I always dreamed of doing. And that's related to my passion for sports. My cousin Craig used to say when we were 8, 9 years old, I used to walk around the farm at my grandparents' place with a corn cob in my hand, pretending like I was doing play-by-play for a baseball game. And that's just always been my passion. And this might be not a good story to tell, but it's the truth, is at my grandparents' place, we had outdoor toilets. And we didn't have the luxury of Charmin. We had the Commercial Appeal, the newspaper. And if I had to go to the outdoor toilet, I would sit there and read box scores of baseball games. And I miss that doing that now because it's hard to find a newspaper in print. But, through all that, I've been able to do radio for 8 or 9 years. And now I'm doing 2 podcasts about sports. I'm working for 3 newspapers covering sports. I do PA announcing for basketball, baseball, and middle school football, and I love doing that. And so the point is, even when you have those ups and downs in your life and you have those events that shape who you are and change how you think about things, if you don't keep your faith, those things don't mean anything. And I know even though I've been a disappointment to God at times, he loves me. And that as long as I realize that the love is mutual, I love him too, he's going to take care of me, and he has. Life happens. Sometimes we're not responsible for everything that happens to us. God didn't take my dad away. He didn't take Pam away from him. It's life. And you've got to learn that he's on his throne no matter what happens. And through the years, that's shaped who I am. It's made me who I am. And some people might not think as much of me as I think of myself, but I know where I'm at. And where I'm at's in a good place.